Springburn wasn't a place where rules were explained. They were demonstrated. Hard streets, cramped tenements, and a constant edge of tension shaped daily life in North Glasgow. By the late 1970s, the old industries were fading, and something else had taken their place: territory, reputation, and the quiet understanding that strength decided everything. For Paul Ferris, violence wasn't chaos. It was communication. He learned early that fear moved faster than words. One act carried further than a dozen warnings. In Springborn, stories didn't need to be accurate to be effective. They just needed to circulate. A name mentioned often enough became truth, and Ferris's name began to travel. What mattered wasn't size or status. It was willingness. The willingness to step forward when others hesitated, to finish what was started, to make outcomes permanent. Ferris understood that hesitation invited weakness, and weakness invited consequences. Violence used precisely solved problems before they grew. This wasn't recklessness. It was calculation. Ferris watched how power functioned in North Glasgow, not through titles or speeches, but through reactions. Who lowered their voice? Who crossed the street? Who suddenly became cooperative? Fear created order where authority failed. Reputation did the rest. It moved through pubs, stairwells, and housing schemes faster than police intelligence ever could. Each retelling sharpened the edges. Each exaggeration added weight. Soon, people who had never met Ferris knew exactly how to behave around him. By the time he reached his early 20s, Ferris didn't need to assert himself. The work came to him. Opportunities followed reputation, and reputation followed fear. By his early 20s, Ferris wasn't looking for power. Power had found him. Power in Glasgow's underworld didn't sit at the top. It flowed downward. Orders were whispered, passed along, and eventually landed in the hands of men who made sure they were obeyed. This was where Paul Ferris belonged. Above him sat the organization, structured, insulated, and careful. Leaders didn't appear at scenes. They didn't raise voices or throw punches. Their authority stayed clean. Ferris's job was to make sure it stayed that way. He didn't run rackets. He didn't handle money. He didn't negotiate. When a decision had already been made, when a debt went unpaid, when a boundary was tested, when fear needed renewing, Ferris was sent. His presence turned instructions into outcomes. That made him invaluable, but it also made him replaceable. In organized crime, enforcers occupy a dangerous space. They know too much about how power is exercised, but none of it belongs to them. They carry the violence so others don't have to. And when pressure builds from police, rivals, or internal paranoia, it's men like Ferris who absorb the risk first. Ferris understood this balance. He wasn't confused about where he stood. His value came from reliability, from finishing what others started, from leaving no ambiguity behind. The streets responded accordingly. Arguments ended when he arrived. Resistance disappeared. Silence followed. Police intelligence began to notice the pattern. Ferris's name surfaced again and again, linked to intimidation, assaults, weapons. But proof was elusive. Witnesses didn't speak. Victims cooperated just long enough to disappear. Fear protected the structure better than loyalty ever could. Ferris didn't make decisions. He made decisions unavoidable. And that role pushed his reputation beyond rumor. beyond exaggeration. It turned him into a certainty, a man whose involvement meant something irreversible was about to happen, and then came the job that made his name permanent. It happened in a North Glasgow housing scheme. Late enough that most people were home, early enough that no one could pretend they hadn't seen anything. The location wasn't chosen for privacy. It was chosen for witnesses. The target was a local figure who had begun operating without permission. Not a boss, not a kingpin, just someone who believed the rules didn't apply to him anymore. That belief needed correcting. Paul Ferris didn't arrive in a hurry. He didn't hide his face. There was no ambush, no chase. He approached openly, in full view of residents watching from windows, stairwells, and doorways that never quite opened. The confrontation was brief. Words were exchanged, not many and not loud. Ferris wasn't there to argue. He was there to deliver certainty. What followed was fast, controlled, and unmistakable. Enough force to leave no confusion about the message. Not enough to turn it into spectacle. People looked away the moment it began. They had learned that watching too closely carried consequences of its own. Still, everyone understood what they were seeing. This wasn't personal. It was instructional. When it was over, Ferris didn't run. He didn't celebrate. He left the same way he arrived, calm, deliberate, unchallenged. The target survived, but survival wasn't the point. Living with the lesson was. By the next morning, the story had already spread, not in detail, in implication. Names weren't needed. Everyone knew who had done it, and more importantly, who had ordered it. The message traveled through pubs, shops, and street corners faster than police could respond. That single incident achieved what weeks of threats never could. It restored boundaries. It reinforced hierarchy. And it reminded North Glasgow that power wasn't theoretical, it was enforced. From that moment on, Ferris stopped being a man. He became a warning. After the incident, Ferris's reputation no longer needed reinforcement. It did the work on its own. Disputes dissolved before they reached him. Debts were settled early. Rivals adjusted routes, routines, and ambitions. Fear spread efficiently without further instruction, but fear has a side effect. It attracts attention. Police pressure began to increase not through arrests, but through presence. Unmarked cars lingered longer. Familiar faces appeared in unfamiliar places. Conversations stopped mid-sentence when strangers entered rooms. Ferris noticed the shift immediately. He had lived long enough in violence to recognize surveillance when he felt it. At the same time, the atmosphere inside the organization changed. Success bred paranoia. Whispers about informants surfaced more often. Trust tightened into suspicion. Meetings became shorter. Details were shared selectively. Ferris began to sense distance where confidence once existed. That was the real danger. Enforcers occupy a narrow window of usefulness. They're essential when fear needs enforcing, but once attention follows, they become liabilities. Ferris had enforced that rule himself more than once. He knew how quickly loyalty could be rewritten as necessity. He started altering habits. Routes changed daily. Conversations became guarded. He carried the quiet awareness that knowing too much was no longer protection. It was exposure. Men who knew where bodies were buried rarely lived long enough to grow old. The streets felt different now. not hostile, watchful, as if the same fear Ferris had spread outward was slowly circling back toward him. He didn't panic. He assessed. Ferris understood something few enforcers ever admitted to themselves. There was no retirement plan, no exit ceremony. When men like him stopped being useful, they didn't leave, they vanished. Ferris had enforced the rules long, enough to know how this ended. Fear is manageable when it's professional. Ferris had lived inside it for years, measured it, used it. But this was different. This fear followed him home. Isolation came first. Trusted faces became distant. Conversations that once flowed freely ended early, cut short by glances and half-sentences. Ferris noticed who stopped calling, who avoided eye contact, who no longer lingered after meetings. Silence had changed tone. Routine followed, or rather, the destruction of it. Routes shifted constantly. Times varied. Familiar places were abandoned without explanation. Ferris stopped trusting patterns because patterns could be studied, and studied men didn't survive long. Sleep became shallow, not from guilt, but from calculation. Every sound carried weight. Every delay invited questions. Ferris stayed armed not because he expected an attack, but because he understood how quickly certainty could turn against him. The fear was no longer abstract. It wasn't about arrests or rivals. It was about proximity, about being too close to people who might need a problem removed. Ferris had been that solution often enough to recognize when he was becoming one. What he stood to lose became clear. Not reputation, not status, life itself, possibly the lives of those around him. In this world, messages were rarely delivered to the intended recipient alone. Ferris understood that loyalty no longer offered protection. Silence no longer guaranteed safety. The rules he had enforced were now aimed directly at him. Survival was no longer about loyalty. It was about timing. Ferris didn't decide to betray the organization all at once. He delayed. He waited for the pressure to ease, for suspicion to pass, for anything to reset the balance. Nothing did. Doubt settled in quietly. Not about what he had done, but about how long it could continue. Each day brought new calculations. Who had spoken? Who had noticed? Who no longer shared information the way they used to? Ferris listened more than he talked, aware that silence could mean safety or preparation. Sleep became fragmented. Nights were spent replaying routines, exits, contingencies. He stayed awake not out of fear, but out of necessity. In his world, hesitation was fatal. And lately, hesitation was all around him. There were moments when escape seemed possible. A clean break, a disappearing act. But Ferris understood the fantasy for what it was. Men like him didn't fade into anonymity. They were remembered too clearly, too visibly. Even distance couldn't erase what he represented. The underworld had its own timeline, and Ferris felt it accelerating. Whispers grew louder. Loyalty tests became subtle but unmistakable. Invitations stopped coming. When they did arrive, they felt less like meetings and more like assessments. Every day he stayed. Silent increased the odds he wouldn't live another week. Ferris didn't panic. He measured the remaining options and found them narrowing fast. Staying loyal meant waiting to be removed. Running meant being hunted. Silence no longer protected anyone. Eventually, Ferris made the only move left. Ferris didn't announce the decision. There was no dramatic break. No confession. Just a quiet step across a line that couldn't be uncrossed. The first contact was cautious, indirect. Ferris didn't trust easily, and now he trusted no one. He tested the response, measured reactions, looked for traps. What he needed wasn't protection. It was confirmation that the door was real, and that once opened, it wouldn't close on him. When he finally spoke, it wasn't emotional. It was precise. Paul Ferris didn't offer opinions. He offered structure. How orders moved. Who insulated themselves from violence. How intimidation was delegated. Where fear was applied deliberately, and where it was allowed to spread on its own. Patterns that had always been suspected were now confirmed by the man who had enforced them. Investigators listened carefully. They already knew pieces of the story. Ferris didn't surprise them with brutality. He surprised them with clarity. He explained how decisions were made untouchable, how distance protected leadership, and how men like him absorbed the risk. Once he started, there was no benefit in stopping. Names followed. Locations, methods, timelines, not all at once, but steadily. Each detail removed another layer of protection from an empire that had relied on silence to survive. What had once been rumor hardened into evidence. The shockwaves were immediate. Inside the underworld, trust collapsed. Conversations froze. Meetings were canceled. Long-standing alliances cracked under the weight of a single realization. If Ferris could talk, anyone could. The rule that had protected everyone for decades had been broken by one of its strongest enforcers. Ferris understood the cost instantly. Cooperation meant exile. It meant permanent visibility. It meant never returning to the life he had built, even if he survived it. But the alternative had already been decided for him. Once spoken, the words couldn't be taken back. The response was swift. Once Ferris's testimony aligned with existing intelligence, hesitation disappeared. Warrants were prepared. Surveillance files were reopened. Financial trails that had once looked inconclusive now pointed in the same direction. What investigators had lacked for years wasn't suspicion, it was confirmation. Arrests followed. Senior figures who had lived comfortably behind layers of distance were suddenly exposed, questioned, pressured. For the first time, the structure of the organization could be shown clearly. Who gave orders, who insulated themselves, and who absorbed the violence. The myth that had protected the empire for decades began to fracture under scrutiny. Courtrooms replaced backrooms. Evidence replaced intimidation. Prosecutors laid out patterns that could no longer be dismissed as coincidence. Defense teams attacked credibility, but the narrative held. Ferris's testimony didn't stand alone. It fit too neatly with what police had already gathered in fragments. The idea of untouchability collapsed publicly. In the streets, the impact was immediate. Power vacuums always are. Without a single unquestioned authority, old alliances dissolved. Rival factions tested boundaries. Former subordinates repositioned themselves. The fear that had once flowed from the top now scattered in every direction. Unstable and unpredictable, the empire didn't fall to bullets. It fell to confirmation. For communities that had lived under its shadow, the collapse was disorienting. Silence no longer offered protection. Certainty no longer existed. The rules had changed, but no one yet knew what they were. For Paul Ferris, the consequences were immediate and personal. Cooperation did not come with freedom. It came with visibility, with isolation, with the understanding that survival no longer depended on reputation but on distance. Ferris had helped dismantle the empire that shaped him. But Ferris didn't walk away untouched. Survival did not mean freedom. When the cases moved forward and the empire collapsed, Ferris didn't step into a new life. He stepped into absence. The world he had enforced no longer claimed him, and the one outside never truly would. Cooperation closed one door permanently and left the others only half open. Exile came first, not always geographic, but social. Old networks vanished overnight. Familiar places became unsafe by association. Names that once carried weight now carried risk. Ferris learned to live without visibility, because visibility invited attention, and attention invited consequences. The threats never needed to be spoken. They existed in the silence, in the understanding that betrayal does not expire. In criminal culture, memory is long, and forgiveness is rare. Ferris lived with the awareness that survival depended not on strength, but on distance. What he lost went beyond protection or power. He lost identity. The role that had defined him, the enforcer, the certainty, the presence, was gone. There was no replacement for it, no clean transition. Men like Ferris are built for pressure, not anonymity. Normal life was not an option. Trust did not come easily, if at all. Every new connection carried calculation. Every routine required adjustment. The instinct to watch, to listen, to anticipate never faded. For Paul Ferris, survival meant carrying the consequences quietly every day. He had escaped the ending most men in his position faced, but escape did not mean peace. Survival came at a price he would pay forever. Paul Ferris wanted what many men in Glasgow's underworld wanted: power, security, survival. What he became was something far rarer and far more dangerous. A man who proved that the strongest empires are not always destroyed from the outside. For years, silence had protected everything. It allowed violence to function. It allowed leaders to remain distant. It allowed fear to pass downward without resistance. Ferris had enforced that silence until he shattered it. Glasgow learned a hard lesson in the aftermath. Fear can control streets, but it cannot protect systems forever. Reputation fades. Authority fractures. And once silence breaks, it never fully returns. Ferris survived. The empire, D-I-D-N single quotes T. Violence built the empire. Words destroyed it. And no one ever trusted silence again. Standard disclaimer: the events described in this video are based on publicly available information, court records, and news reports. All individuals mentioned are considered innocent unless proven guilty in a court of law. This content is presented for informational and educational purposes only, and does not intend to defame, misrepresent, or accuse any person or organization.